Overseas now, there is late-breaking news tonight about the civil war in Libya, specifically word that Moammar Qadafi may be preparing to flee as the rebels close in on his territory. We have two reports on this tonight. First, to NBC's Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon, where he has learned some exclusive information on this. Jim, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. U.S. officials tell NBC News intelligence reports indicate that Libyan leader Moammar Qadafi is in the process of making plans to evacuate both himself and his family from Libya. And one official suggested that could happen within a matter of days. The reports also indicate that Qadafi would go to Tunisia, where he may be granted exile. And earlier this week, Defense Secretary Leon Panetta said, quote, "I think the sense is that Qadafi's days are numbered." But to be clear, Brian, there's no guarantee that the unpredictable Qadafi would actually make good on any plans and actually leave Libya. But U.S. officials are the most optimistic yet that the 5-month military standoff between NATO forces and Moammar Qadafi may soon be coming to an end.
All right, Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon tonight. And from there, we now go to Libya. Our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, has just arrived there for us. Richard, you heard Jim use the critical word unpredictable. Qadafi's famous for that. What will you look for, and could there be any signs on the ground that this kind of movement is coming?
Well, Brian, after months of deadlock, we are definitely seeing signs that things are developing very quickly. Rebel forces have managed to surround and cut off the city of Tripoli. There is intermittent power in the city. People are starting to leave Tripoli on our way in from Tunisia. We saw many cars going in the opposite direction, families from Tripoli leaving the country itself. The rebel strategy at this stage appears to be to try and strangle the capital city, cutting it off from supplies and fuel in particular, hoping that will trigger a collapse.
All right, Richard Engel, who again has arrived in Libya. Jim Miklaszewski before that at the Pentagon. Thanks to you both. Now to another active front in that region, Syria, and the embattled leader there after months of a brutal crackdown. For the first time today, President Obama explicitly called for President Assad to step aside, and he described the last several months as ferocious brutality against the Syrian people. A lot of people are asking why specifically right now. We get the story from our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell.
The violence has been relentless for 5 months, captured here by social media. Mr. Obama called it a sustained onslaught, including the imprisonment, torture, and slaughter of the Syrian people.
Assad is standing in their way. For the sake of the Syrian people, the time has come for him to step aside.
The U.S. estimates at least 2,000 may have died, what the United Nations Human Rights Commission today called possible crimes against humanity, including summary executions. Also today, the president imposed new sanctions, largely against Syria's oil industry. But Syria exports relatively little oil and almost none to the U.S. The White House acknowledges Assad will not go easily.
There's not going to be an orderly transition in Damascus. There's going to be a violent transition. Sooner or later, hopefully, the Syrian military will break apart. That could mean civil war.
And officials say the White House fears Assad, if attacked, would use his known arsenal of chemical weapons. With so much evidence of slaughter, why has it taken so long to call for Assad to go? Aides say the president needed to enlist European allies. And the real game changer, Saudi's King Abdullah, who finally broke with Assad this week. The State Department has now restricted the travel of Syria's ambassador to the U.S., Imad Mustafa, and asked the FBI to investigate whether Syrian diplomats here are harassing Syrian Americans and retaliating against their families in Syria. Still, the administration is rejecting Republican demands that the U.S. ambassador to Syria, Robert Ford, be brought home. They argue the American ambassador is the best link to the dissidents and the only way to know the real extent of the crackdown. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News, Washington.